Hi, I'm Jamie Flinchball, host of People Solve Problems, and today we have another guest, Frank Nestore, to join us. Good to see you.
Good seeing you, Jamie. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you here. So Frank is the vice president in Mathtech's public sector consulting practice. So he works with all sorts of different, mostly governmental agencies at a bunch of different levels. Spends a lot of time helping clients visualize their future and create plans to achieve it. So great, strategy and then execution, and brings a variety of perspectives to his work with clients from his varied professional and personal background. So we've talked shop before, and always enjoy it. So we're here to talk about problem solving.
Sounds like a plan. Let's do it.
Awesome. So, both in your teams and with your clients and that work, there's plenty of problems to go around. So, how do you prioritize problems when, of course, there's so many things to go work on?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think there's a variety of types of problems. So as you said, a lot of the work that I do, that our teams do, is around helping public sector agencies kind of figure out what their future is and plan that future out, and then actually implement that future. And that always touches on changes in the way they operate, use technology. So there are problems within that are big, and they're large problems, and they have many different impact points. So when I start to think about problems and prioritization, I start to think from that lens. What is the impact? Who's impacted? How many are impacted? And then also the time. So when we're doing those sorts of projects and we're talking about changing the way an agency, which applies to any organization, does their work and trying to improve it and use technology, one of the problems we encounter is people have to get used to that change. They have to embrace that. They're going to have a whole new way of working in the future. And in the public sector, it's very pronounced and very stark, typically, because you're going from older systems, manual processes, into a more modern, automated world. So that's a big problem. And it's a long running problem. And so the strategy for that and the prioritization for that is to say, well, we need to look at how that happens over the life cycle of what we're doing, and what can we do to mitigate that. So that's more longer running. But in terms of more what I would call day-to-day problems, in terms of our project work, because everything we do is a project, start, finish, specific goals in mind, there are problems that pop up every day. And the prioritization there is typically the same. What's the impact? Who's impacted? How quickly do we need to respond? And I would even say, when I think problem, I think from a project management standpoint, there are risks and there are issues. And risks are things that could happen and have an impact, and issues are things that are happening and having an impact. So I think problems are issues. But I also, when I think about problems, think about risks, because those are things that could become problems. And obviously I have, hopefully, longer lead times so you can react to them. So I think it's a variety of lenses. And so, what's the impact? What's the timeline? What are things that can be done? How many other people need to be involved, et cetera?
Yeah, I love a couple of things that I really loved about that whole thing. First is, it does depend on your perspective in that situation, and plenty of people, and I imagine this is true in the public sector as well. You could just sit at your desk and have no aspirations of moving forward, but you're still going to be filled with problems. But you're really defining problems as, I want to hit a new future. I have a vision of what the future looks like, and then what are the problems to get to there. That's actually going to look for problems, essentially,
Yeah,
right?
that's a
And
good point. Yeah.
and and then use those to help achieve that future. And then I do think time, as you said, the resources and when, and is a big factor in this, that doesn't get enough attention. One of my favorite questions to ask people when they talk about a big problem is, why now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why not last year? Why not next year? So that just thinking about time is an important aspect. So,
Yeah.
in your role at sort of the VP level, there's a lot of different ways you can engage in problem solving. So how do you think about and decide what your role, your personal role needs to be between delegation and ownership and engagement and facilitation? There's so many different choices there. So how do you decide on your role?
Yeah. Yeah, that is something that admittedly, I still struggle with today. I mean, I think when you get more and more positions of leadership and more responsibility, from what my experience, that happens because you're really good at executing and getting things done. And then as you get more and more leadership responsibility, the expectation is that you're overseeing and you've got teams to get those things done. But speaking personally, my comfort zone is getting things done.
Mm-hmm.
So now leading people and leading teams, it's a constant evaluation loop. And have you ever heard of the OODA loop? You've heard of the OODA loop.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right?
OODA loop is I don't want to say well known, but a great model for thinking about learning and problem solving.
Yeah, yeah. So our team has been kind of focused on that decision-making framework this past year. We've done some presentations on it. And in a sense, there's a continuous set of OODA loops running in my head about prioritization. And I think, again, just like how do you deal with problems, how do I deal with delegation is sort of the same thing. There are questions like, how important is this thing? What's the time frame? Am I the best person to do it? From the standpoint of, am I going to execute this better than anybody else on the team and get it done the best way? Do I have team members that could get it done better than me? Right? That's why I bring people on board. They're better than me at certain things. That's what the team should be.
Mm-hmm.
Are there elements in that delegation OODA loop which are, yeah, I could do it at 100%. Of course, if I do it, it's going to be 100% from my standpoint, right? But what if I delegate it and it's 80% and it gets it done and I'm able to focus on other things? I'm able to kind of look ahead as opposed to looking down at that problem in front of me. Those are some of the things that I think about when it comes to delegation, but it is a constant evaluation because there's the initial onset of a problem or an issue. And okay, how do we deal with this? And do we delegate that? Do we work on it as a team? Do I handle it? And then there's the ongoing evaluation of how it's going.
Mm-hmm.
Because you might need to change gears. Something else might come in for which the delegated person is better at and is higher priority. Something else may come in that affects my availability. So I just think it's that constant set of questions that I ask myself.
Yeah, no, very interesting. And I think, that's, how do you ask that question of, am I the right person to solve it? If you look at it at an individual problem standpoint, that's one thing. But if you see it as a portfolio of problems, very different, right? So as you said, like, yeah, I might solve this problem better, but that means I'm not going to solve this other problem. And so I think asking questions like, what problem am I the only one who can solve? And let me start there, and then
Right.
let other people solve the rest.
I like that.
Um,
Yeah.
I do want to ask the OODA loop a little bit about the OODA loop for you all. How did that get introduced? Is that like just a framework everybody's using, or is it more of a sort of casual idea in the background?
So I don't recall when I heard about it, maybe a year or two ago in kind of a formal setting, some leadership books or podcasts. And so it was introduced to our team maybe a year ago. And I said, I think that this would be an interesting decision-making framework as we go and we do a lot of conferences, we do a lot of presentations, interesting topic. And it really was met with a lot of success in terms of the audience. And one of the things that I wanted us to get across was this is, to me, one of the best things to keep in mind about that OODA loop cycle is try and do it quickly and react to your decisions, because there's no such thing as a wrong decision. There are decisions which just drive different actions, right? So the whole, and better than I do, the origin of this was fighter pilots.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was quickly responding. And why are American fighter pilots better than Russian fighter pilots? Because the Russian pilots had better planes, But American fighter pilots were obviously going through this OODA loop better, had a better visual field of view, and so they could observe and orient better, quicker to the decisions that were being made. That doesn't translate to the public sector, but the idea of saying we're not battling somebody, right, which is how the OODA loop started, but we are battling bad process, and we're battling status quo to try and improve. And if we look at it that way, and we use this, it enables decision makers to kind of step back a little bit and say, well, I don't have to get it all right the first time. It can be incremental. And this is happening all the time with every decision I make. So that was kind of the theme of it. I just thought it was intriguing, and I think it resonated pretty well.
No, I love that about the rapidness of it, right? Because you can learn faster by taking a rapid, fast decision and then building off of that as you go. So I'm going to predict the answer in my head, but is OODA a template that you use? Do you use any templates and tools, or is it just sort of the conversation and, I'll say, like you said, in your head?
I think it's a lot. Right now, it's a mindset that our team has. Okay. I mean, there is a basic tool that we have for it that we put together, but it really, to me, is a mindset. Because the other part of that, success for me, my perspective of the OODA loop, is you have to really let go of the decision, the results being linked to yourself. So it has to be, you have to kind of let go of the angst of saying, well, if I make a decision and it's wrong, it's on me and I'm going to look bad and it's not going to be good. To really use it effectively, in my mind, it's, we have a goal as a team. Let's go forward. Here's a decision. Let's react to it and not worry really about who did anything right or wrong throughout that process. So right now, it's a mindset for our team that we're bringing to bear with our clients.
I love that. So yeah, that was my prediction. So the way you described it, you were living it rather than, sort of getting stuck in it. So fantastic. So you talked about delegation and letting your team, solve problems, and you have all this experience that you bring to the process. So I want to talk about coaching a little bit. How you coach your team, how flexible you are in your coaching. Do you adjust to their needs? Do you have your own style? Whether it's individual or team based. How do you think about your role as a coach in the work?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, coaching is very informal, and it typically is reactive. It's almost employ the OODA loop with coaching, because I have found that it really depends on how I'm interacting with the folks that I'm working with. So whether it's a client, whether it's members of my team, I just try and be receptive and kind of I use this term, read the room and kind of see how it's going, because I've had situations where I've thought I would go in with a certain approach. You and I have known each other a long time. That, sometimes I can be pretty top down, pretty direct. This is what we're doing. And obviously, surprise, that doesn't always work, especially when you're coaching and have a team. So I've had to adjust that. And I've had to adjust that based on the reactions that I've gotten. And that's been it's been a learning process for me. I think it's important to acknowledge that, as leaders, we're not right all the time and we're not perfect. And it's okay to go and approach something and then reevaluate and change your approach, and even admit that maybe I didn't approach that so well, but let's move forward as a team. I think that helps with relationships, which are key to any sort of coaching model. I will say the term coaching for me is always a bit of a challenge. And a little bit of my personal perspective on it. It almost indicates a hierarchy. And I feel like the best sort of interactions I've had were just devoid of that sense of hierarchy. And I mean, obviously it exists, but but the best sort of situations were where that hierarchy wasn't really at all prominent, and it was acknowledged that even though I might be the de facto leader on a project or the de facto authority on something, and I'm leading this officially, I'm still learning too. And I can still be coached, and I can still be taught things by everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And when I've worked with teams that have had that mindset, like we've, knocked down walls, like we've done a lot of great stuff. So I think it's just a personal perspective I have in terms of words, and sometimes words I think are important, the connotation of words. So
yeah, no, I do. And certain organizations have that, they have bad history with the word coaching, and it's not always the right word. And it doesn't always have to be that overt. So I'd imagine, I'll ask the question anyway, but do people know they're being coached, or when you go into coaching mode, or does it just sort of become part of the conversation?
I think for me personally, it's just part of the conversation. I think there are other situations, other folks on our team that do have and like to establish the fact that they're coaching, and I think that works too. But for me, I feel like the best situation for me, and even as I receive it, is let's just have a conversation, like person to person, and um, that's just how I've approached it.
Yeah, and I've told lots of people, I believe coaching is a very personal thing, and you have to bring you to the table. And so what's the right way to coach is the right way for you to coach,
Yeah,
rather than somebody else's approach. So
yeah, totally agree. Yeah, and you have to really, I think it goes back to just being receptive to what that other person is bringing to the table that you're talking to. You're going to find out pretty quickly how it's going, and so that's important.
fantastic. Well, that's it's a lot of ground to cover. So I appreciate you sharing your thoughts and experiences and the OODA loop with
Yeah,
everyone. So and wish you and the team all the best.
great. Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the People Solve Problems podcast. Let's keep the conversation going. Visit jflinch.com for more episodes and other content. And continue to join us on your podcast app, of course. We greatly appreciate your feedback through reviews and ratings. Consider expanding your understanding of problem solving with Jamie's book, People Solve Problems: The Power of Every Person, Every Day, Every Problem. Available on Amazon. Until next time, keep learning, innovating, and solving problems.